everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The emergency court order arrived on a Tuesday morning via email. I was in my home office reviewing project timelines when my phone buzzed with the notification. The subject line read, "Emergency hearing response required within 48 hours." I opened the attachment. The language was aggressive, demanding, and designed to intimidate. My sister Rachel was suing me for fraudulent misrepresentation of employment status and unjust enrichment from family resources. She claimed I'd been lying about my career for years, living off family money while pretending to have a successful job. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. The most interesting part was buried in the procedural notes. Defendant will testify alone. No expert witnesses permitted. No character witnesses. No employment verification letters. Testimony only. My brother David texted me 20 minutes later. "Just so you know, Mom's judge friend is presiding. Judge Patricia Henderson. They play tennis together every weekend. You should probably just settle." I read his message twice, then set my phone down and returned to work. I'm Emily Anderson, 32 years old, and I've been the family disappointment for as long as I can remember. Not because I failed at anything, but because I didn't succeed in ways they could understand or control. My sister Rachel is a corporate attorney at a mid-sized firm in Chicago. She makes $180,000 a year, drives a BMW, and never lets anyone forget either fact. She married a surgeon named Bradley who came from old money. Together they represented everything my parents valued: visible success, prestigious careers, country club memberships. My brother David works in pharmaceutical sales, pulling in around $120,000 annually with bonuses. He's engaged to a woman whose father owns a chain of car dealerships. More visible success. More connections they could brag about. Then there was me. I graduated with a degree in computer science and immediately started working for what I told my family was a government contractor doing IT work. They assumed I meant help desk support or maybe database management. I never corrected them. "So you're basically tech support?" my dad had asked at my graduation dinner. "Something like that," I'd replied. The truth was significantly more complex, but I'd learned early that my family didn't actually want to understand my work. They wanted simple answers that fit into boxes they recognized. Businessman. Government IT contractor was close enough to office worker that they stopped asking questions. For the next 10 years I let them believe whatever they wanted. I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic. I rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Arlington, Virginia. I wore clothes from Target and carried a backpack instead of a briefcase. At family gatherings I smiled quietly while Rachel talked about her latest case and David discussed his sales numbers. "Still doing the computer thing?" Dad would ask every Thanksgiving. "Still doing the computer thing," I'd confirm. What they didn't know, what they'd never thought to ask about, was that I held a top-secret/SCI security clearance and worked as a senior systems architect for defense cybersecurity programs. My IT work involved designing classified networks for military installations and intelligence agencies. My modest apartment was a deliberate choice. My old car was paid off and reliable. My simple wardrobe meant I didn't stand out in secure facilities where photographing or even discussing clothing brands could be a security violation. I made $285,000 a year in base salary, plus performance bonuses that had pushed my total compensation to over $400,000 the previous year. I had $1.8 million in investments, owned a vacation property in Montana that I'd bought under an LLC for privacy reasons, and held stock options in 3 defense contractors that were collectively worth another $2.3 million. But I'd never told my family any of this. Why? Because I'd learned something important. People who dismiss you when they think you have nothing will absolutely try to control you when they discover you have everything. My career had taken off faster than I'd anticipated. After 3 years at my first contractor position, I was recruited by a specialized firm that worked exclusively on classified Department of Defense projects. The work was challenging, the clearance process was extensive, and the compensation was exceptional. By 28, I was leading a team of 12 engineers on a cybersecurity architecture project for a 3-letter agency I still can't name. By 30, I was consulting directly with Pentagon officials on network vulnerabilities. By 31, I'd been awarded my first contract as a prime contractor rather than a subcontractor. A $12 million project that my small team executed flawlessly. The classified nature of my work meant I genuinely couldn't discuss details with anyone who didn't have clearance and need-to-know access. This made it easy to deflect family questions. "How's work?" Rachel would ask. "Busy. Lots of projects," I'd say. "Still fixing computers?" Among other things. She'd lose interest immediately. David would already be talking about his latest sales quota. My parents would be asking about Rachel's upcoming vacation or David's new car. I was invisible to them. And I preferred it that way. Meanwhile, my career continued to accelerate. I brought in a business partner, Maria Chin, who had complementary expertise in systems integration. Together, we formed Anderson Chin Solutions, a small but highly specialized firm. Within 2 years, we had $53 million in active government contracts and a waiting list of agencies requesting our services. I still drove my Honda. Still lived in my apartment. Still wore my Target clothes. My family still thought I was barely making ends meet doing tech support. The trouble started at my nephew's 8th birthday party 6 weeks before the court hearing. Rachel was hosting at her house, a 4-bedroom colonial in an expensive suburb. I arrived with a gift card and a Lego set, dressed in jeans and a sweater. Rachel was wearing something that probably cost more than my monthly rent, though I knew for a fact my net worth exceeded hers by a factor of 7. "Emily," Mom called out when I walked into the backyard. "We were just talking about you." Never a good sign. I found my family clustered around the patio table. Rachel, David, my parents, and several of Rachel's attorney friends from her firm. "We're concerned," Mom said using her intervention voice. "Sweetie, you're 32 years old. You're still renting. Still driving that old car. You've been at the same company for years with apparently no advancement." "I'm doing fine," I said calmly. "Are you though?" Rachel jumped in. She had her lawyer voice activated. "Because honestly, Em, it looks like you've been treading water for a decade. When was your last promotion? Your last raise?" "My compensation is adequate," I replied. David laughed. "Adequate? Emily, I made $140,000 last year. Rachel makes almost $200,000. We're worried you're being taken advantage of. What are you actually making at this government contractor place?" I could have told them the truth. I could have explained that my income exceeded both of theirs combined. Instead, I said, "I'm comfortable." "Comfortable isn't a number," Rachel pressed. "Are you making $60,000? $70,000? Because honestly, for someone with a computer science degree and a decade of experience, you should be making 6 figures minimum." One of her attorney friends nodded sympathetically. "There are resources for people in your situation. Career counseling, resume workshops." "I appreciate the concern," I interrupted gently. "But I'm genuinely fine." "You're not fine." Mom's voice rose. "Emily, we love you, but it's time for some tough love. You've been coasting for years. You have no assets, no investments, no property." "You don't actually know that," I said quietly. "Then prove it," Rachel challenged. "Show us your financial statements. Show us you're not just barely scraping by while telling us everything is fine." "No," I said simply. The table went quiet. "No." Dad repeated. "My finances are private. I'm an adult. I don't need to prove anything to you." Rachel's expression hardened. "That's what I thought. You can't prove it because there's nothing to prove. You're broke, embarrassed, and too proud to admit it." I stood up. "Thank you for the party. I'm going to head out." "Running away as usual," David muttered. I left without responding. 3 weeks later, Rachel filed her lawsuit. The complaint was 23 pages of accusations, all centered on one claim: that I had fraudulently represented myself as financially stable while secretly borrowing money from family resources and never repaying it. It was complete fiction. I'd never borrowed money from anyone in my family. I'd never even asked. But Rachel had constructed an elaborate theory. She claimed that because our grandmother had left me $50,000 when she died 8 years ago, and because I clearly had no visible assets or income, I must have spent that money improperly and now owed the family repayment with interest, totaling $127,000. The legal argument was absurd. Inheritance isn't a loan. But Rachel was counting on something else: the optics. She'd attached evidence to the complaint: photos of my old car, screenshots of my apartment building's rental listing, photographs of me at family events wearing inexpensive clothing, a written statement from my mother attesting that I'd never mentioned any career advancement or financial success in 10 years. The narrative was clear: irresponsible younger sister wastes inheritance, lives in poverty, refuses to admit failure, must be held accountable. The emergency hearing was Rachel's tactical move. She wanted to catch me off guard, force me to testify without preparation, and get a quick judgment before I could mount a real defense. She didn't know that I'd been dealing with adversarial legal challenges in federal contract disputes for 5 years. She didn't know that I had 3 attorneys on retainer. She didn't know that one of them specialized in security clearance holders dealing with frivolous lawsuits designed to create financial pressure, a known method for targeting cleared personnel. Most importantly, she didn't know that my work required me to maintain relationships with some very serious people who didn't appreciate their contractors being harassed. I forwarded the lawsuit to my attorney, James Patterson, within an hour of receiving it. His response came back in 10 minutes. "This is harassment. Do you want to fight or settle?" "Fight," I replied. "Good. I'll need authorization to disclose some classified contract information in a limited, sealed manner. I'll request approval." I called my contracting officer at the Defense Contract Management Agency. "I have a situation." I explained the lawsuit. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "This sounds like someone's trying to create financial stress to potentially compromise your clearance. That's my concern. Send me the details. I'll route it through security. You may want to inform your chain as well." I sent the information and then made another call to Colonel James Wright, my Pentagon liaison for our largest active contract. He'd been my point of contact for 3 years, and we'd developed a solid professional relationship. "Colonel Wright, this is Emily Anderson. I have a legal situation I need to brief you on." I explained the lawsuit, the emergency hearing, the restrictions on witnesses. There was a long pause. "Ms. Anderson, let me make sure I understand. Your family is suing you claiming you're financially irresponsible and have no legitimate career, and they've structured the hearing to prevent you from presenting evidence of your actual employment." "That's correct, sir." "And the judge is a personal friend of your mother's?" "Also correct." Another pause. Then, "What day is this hearing?" "Thursday at 2 p.m. Fairfax County Circuit Court." "I'll check my schedule. This contract is worth $18 million to the American taxpayer. If there's even a suggestion that one of my prime contractors is being subjected to harassment that could affect their security clearance or financial stability, I want to understand the situation personally." "Sir, you don't need to. Ms. Anderson, I'll see you Thursday." The call ended. I sat back in my chair and allowed myself a small smile. Thursday arrived. I dressed in a simple gray suit, professional but not expensive looking. I drove my Honda to the courthouse, parked in the public lot, and walked inside carrying only a small notebook. Rachel was already there with her attorney, a sharp-looking woman named Vanessa Brooks. My brother David sat in the gallery with my parents. They all wore expressions of concern mixed with superiority, the look of people who believe they're helping a wayward family member see reason. My attorney, James Patterson, sat at the defense table. He nodded to me as I approached. "They're confident," he observed quietly. "They have no reason not to be," I replied. Judge Patricia Henderson took the bench at exactly 2 p.m. She was a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to controlling her courtroom. She smiled warmly at my mother in the gallery. "This is an emergency hearing in the matter of Rachel Anderson Keating versus Emily Anderson," the judge began. "Miss Brooks, you may proceed." Vanessa Brooks stood. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of financial irresponsibility and fraudulent representation. The plaintiff, Ms. Anderson Keating, is seeking repayment of inheritance funds that were misused by the defendant, plus damages for emotional distress caused by the defendant's decade of deception about her true financial status." She presented the evidence. The photos. The statements. A spreadsheet showing what Rachel's attorney claimed was a reasonable calculation of what I should have earned over 10 years versus what I'd actually earned. A number they'd apparently invented based on entry-level government contractor salaries. The defendant has consistently refused to provide financial documentation to her family, Brooks continued. She's evaded questions about her career advancement. She maintains a lifestyle consistent with near poverty while claiming to be fine. This pattern suggests either financial irresponsibility or fraudulent concealment. Judge Henderson nodded along. And you're seeking what remedy? Immediate repayment of $127,000, plus legal fees, plus a court order requiring the defendant to submit to financial counseling and provide quarterly financial reports to the family for the next 2 years. I kept my expression neutral. The financial counseling and quarterly reports demand was outrageous and would never survive appeal, but it told me everything I needed to know about Rachel's real goal: control. Ms. Patterson, does your client wish to respond? The judge asked. James stood. Your Honor, the defendant categorically denies all allegations. The inheritance in question was legally received 8 years ago and has been properly managed. There is no basis for repayment as inheritance is not a loan. Furthermore, my client's career and finances are completely legitimate, and this lawsuit appears to be harassment designed to. I'll determine what constitutes harassment, counsel, Judge Henderson interrupted coolly. Does your client have evidence to present? We do, Your Honor, but the emergency order specifies. The order specifies no expert witnesses, the judge said. I'm asking if your client has personal testimony or documentation. I stood. Your Honor, I have documentation. However, much of my employment information is classified and cannot be disclosed in open court without proper security protocols. Rachel's attorney actually laughed. Your Honor, the defendant is claiming her IT work is classified? This is exactly the kind of exaggeration and evasion the plaintiff has endured for years. I'm not claiming anything, I said evenly. I'm stating a fact. I hold a top-secret/SCI security clearance and work on classified Department of Defense contracts. Disclosing specific project details without authorization would violate federal law. Judge Henderson looked skeptical. Ms. Anderson, this court is not equipped for classified proceedings. If you can't provide evidence. The courtroom doors opened. Everyone turned. A man in a military dress uniform walked down the center aisle. He wore the eagles of a full colonel, and his uniform displayed rows of ribbons including Afghanistan and Iraq campaign medals. He carried a briefcase stamped with a red secret cover sheet visible on top. He stopped at the bar. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. I'm Colonel James Wright, Department of Defense Contract Management Agency. I'm the contracting officer's representative for Ms. Anderson's current government contracts. May I approach? The judge stared at him. The entire courtroom had gone silent. This is an emergency civil hearing, Colonel. I'm not sure what business the Department of Defense has. With respect, Your Honor, when one of our prime contractors is subjected to legal proceedings that could affect their security clearance or financial stability, the department takes a direct interest. Ms. Anderson holds $53 million in active classified contracts. This hearing directly pertains to her financial status and career legitimacy, which are matters of federal concern. My sister's face had gone completely white. My mother looked like she might faint. David's mouth was hanging open. Judge Henderson recovered her composure. Colonel, this is a civil matter between family members. I understand that, Your Honor. However, Ms. Brooks has made statements in open court suggesting that Ms. Anderson's employment is fraudulent or exaggerated. As her contracting officer's representative, I'm here to clarify that Ms. Anderson is indeed a cleared defense contractor working on classified programs. I have unclassified summary documentation I can submit for the court's review. He opened his briefcase and removed several folders. These are unclassified contract summaries showing Ms. Anderson's firm Anderson Solutions as prime contractor on 3 current Department of Defense programs. Total contract value, $53 million. Ms. Anderson's compensation is competitive with senior executives in the defense sector. I cannot disclose the exact amount without her permission, but I can state for the record that it substantially exceeds $200,000 annually. The courtroom was absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. James Patterson stood. Your Honor, with the Colonel's permission, I'd like to submit additional documentation. Ms. Anderson's W-2 from last year, her investment account statements, and the deed to her property in Montana, which she owns free and clear. He placed the documents before the judge. Judge Henderson's expression changed as she reviewed them. The W-2 showed $412,000 in total compensation. The investment statements showed $1.8 million in assets. The Montana deed was for a property valued at $780,000. Ms. Anderson, the judge said slowly, "You're a millionaire." "Yes, Your Honor," I replied calmly. Rachel found her voice. "This has to be fake. She drives a Honda Civic. She rents an apartment. She wears clothing appropriate for someone who works in secure facilities where expensive items and designer brands would be inappropriate," Colonel Wright interrupted. "She drives a reliable vehicle that doesn't attract attention. She rents in Arlington because it's close to the Pentagon and DISA facilities where she frequently works. These are all smart choices for someone in her position." Judge Henderson turned to Rachel's attorney. "Ms. Brooks, do you have any evidence, any actual evidence, that your client loaned money to the defendant?" Vanessa Brooks looked at her files. "The inheritance was an inheritance, not a loan," the judge said sharply. "Was there any written agreement? Any promissory note? Any bank transfer records showing a loan?" "No, but..." "Then you've brought a frivolous lawsuit into my courtroom claiming the defendant defrauded the family by, what? Being quietly successful while her family assumed she was poor." Rachel stood up. "She lied to us." "I never lied," I said, turning to face her. "You asked if I was doing computer work. I said yes. You asked if I was comfortable. I said yes. You assumed that meant I was barely scraping by. That was your assumption, not my lie. You let us believe. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. The same way you've always done with me. You never wanted to know about my actual work because it didn't fit the narrative you'd built. I was supposed to be the failure. The disappointment. The one who needed your advice and your pity and your control." My voice remained calm, but every word landed with precision. "I chose not to share my success with you because I knew, this is exactly what would happen. The moment you found out I had something you couldn't control, you'd find a way to attack it. And here we are. You filed a lawsuit claiming I owe you money that I never borrowed, based on an inheritance that was legally mine, because you can't stand the fact that I succeeded without your approval or your help." Mom started crying. Dad looked stunned. David stared at the floor. Rachel's face was red. "You're so arrogant." "No," I interrupted. "I'm competent. There's a difference. I built a successful career in a difficult field. I made smart financial choices. I live within my means and save aggressively. I did everything right. And instead of being proud of me, you sued me." Judge Henderson cleared her throat. "I've heard enough. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Ms. Brooks, I'm sanctioning your client $15,000 for bringing a frivolous claim. Ms. Anderson, you're entitled to reasonable attorney's fees." She looked at my family. "I'm also going to say something off the record. This was a shameful waste of court resources. Your daughter is clearly a successful professional who chose to live modestly and privately. Instead of respecting that choice, you attempted to humiliate her in court based on assumptions and invented debts. I suggest you use this as an opportunity for reflection." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." Rachel tried to approach me as I gathered my things. "Emily, wait." "No," I said simply. "Please, we didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't care enough to actually understand my life. You cared about feeling superior. That's on you." Colonel Wright appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Anderson, I have a 4 p.m. meeting at the Pentagon. Do you need anything else from me here?" "No, sir. Thank you for coming." He nodded. "For what it's worth, your work speaks for itself. Don't let this distract you from the mission." "I won't, sir." He left. My family stood frozen watching. My mother finally found her voice. "Emily, honey, if you'd known I was successful, you wouldn't have treated me like a failure. But that's the problem, Mom. Your respect was conditional on me meeting standards you set, living a life you could brag about. I don't need that anymore." "We're your family," Dad said. "Family doesn't sue each other over imaginary debts," I replied. "Family doesn't mock each other's careers or assume the worst. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. I turned to Rachel. You'll receive my attorney's fee invoice within 30 days. I expect it to be paid in full. If not, I'll file for enforcement. Emily, please. You wanted to know what I make? $412,000 last year. You wanted to know what I'm worth? About $3.2 million including real estate. You wanted proof I'm successful? There it is. Are you happy now? She said nothing. Tears ran down her face. I picked up my notebook and walked out of the courtroom. James Patterson caught up with me in the hallway. That went well. Did it? Your sister's paying $15,000 in sanctions plus our fees. The judge called her lawsuit shameful in open court. I'd call that a win. I nodded. Send me your final bill. And thank you. You're welcome. For what it's worth, you handled that with a lot more grace than I would have. I drove home in my Honda Civic, parked in my apartment building's lot, and went upstairs to my modest 2-bedroom rental. My phone started buzzing within an hour. David. That. I declined every call. Finally, a text from my mother. Please. We need to talk about this. We're sorry. I typed back. I needed you to believe in me when you thought I had nothing. You couldn't do that. I don't need you now that I have everything. I blocked all their numbers and returned to work. 3 weeks later, Rachel's attorney's check arrived for $22,400, the $15,000 sanction plus James Patterson's fees. I deposited it and moved on. My family tried other channels. They sent emails. They had mutual friends reach out. Rachel even showed up at my apartment building once, but I refused to let her in. 6 months later, I received a formal letter from Rachel's attorney. A different attorney this time, not Vanessa Brooks. It was a written apology, professionally drafted, acknowledging that the lawsuit was baseless and expressing regret for the harm caused. I read it once and filed it away. A year after the hearing, my company won a new contract worth $78 million. The press release went out on the Department of Defense website. My name was listed as principal investigator. My mother sent me the link with a message. We saw this. We're proud of you. We know we don't deserve to say that. But it's true. I didn't respond. 2 years later, I sold my company to a larger defense contractor for $127 million. Maria and I split it evenly. After taxes, I walked away with $48 million. I bought a house in Montana near my existing property. I started consulting part-time and spending more time hiking, reading, and living quietly. I never reconciled with my family. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. But I did send Rachel one final message on the 3-year anniversary of the court hearing. You asked me once to prove I was successful. I didn't owe you that proof then, and I don't owe it to you now. But I want you to know that I built everything I have without your support, without your approval, and without your belief. I didn't need you to succeed. I just needed you to leave me alone. You finally did. Thank you for that. She never responded. I'm 37 now. I have more money than I'll ever need. I have work that matters. I have friends who value me for who I am, not what I can prove. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that when my family tried to tear me down in court, they accidentally revealed to themselves just how far I'd risen. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's succeeding so completely that their opinion becomes irrelevant.